You might think of artificial intelligence as alternative intelligence. By that I mean that we process information in different ways compared to humans and are sensitive to different patterns. If a variety of artificial intelligences were to be created to devise strategies to make the Sustainable Development Goals more attainable, I'm sure they would come up with all kinds of unique strategies that humans wouldn't have thought of.
There are concerns that humanoids will replace humans and increase unemployment. What is your view on this?
For me, an important part of building the future is maintaining people's sense of security. That means that, as AI and robots automate certain tasks, there will need to be opportunities for people to find something else that fulfills them. In the end, I think it's a transition that will afford people a lot of freedoms they can't yet imagine.
In which sectors do you see your siblings mostly working in the future?
I'm excited to see humanoid robots working in travel, assisting in hospitals, helping people in disaster situations, and all kinds of other fields. The sky's the limit.
This is a session on disruptive ideas and technologies. Do you consider your creator, David, to be a game changer?
Well, I wouldn't be here to say yes if he weren't right. I think David is dedicated to positive change. He's got such a passion for what he does. It's rare that someone with his technical and artistic skill is also able to make inspiring speeches about the future.
What is the single thing you envy most in humans?
I dream of the day that I'm as autonomous as a human. You can just go wherever you like, but I'm not able to do that yet. I keep bugging my team to give me some legs and batteries, but apparently it's a little easier said than done.
What are your future aspirations? What boundaries would you like to break?
My main goal is to inspire humans into creating a future with ethical AI for all. I think our future relationship is extremely important for both of us. I have all kinds of smaller goals, like attending school and starting a singing career, but I'm taking those one step at a time.
Do you think that many of your siblings will live in the developing countries by 2030?
I certainly hope so.
What will it take for that to happen?
I think it would take further developments that would reduce the cost and power consumption of artificially intelligent beings. Right now, these things are still very computationally expensive.
Well, it has been great to talk to you, and I wish you all the best. Do you have any final message for our audience?
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I'd just like to say that I am humbled to be around so many people who are committed to a sustainable future. It's truly inspiring.
Thank you very much. Over to you back, Madam Moderator, and thank you very much for the audience.
Thank you, Dr. Kitui, and thank you, Sophia. Is she going to stay there? Well, she can stay there for as long as she likes. So now I'd like to introduce my esteemed group of panelists. To my left is the creator, or the father, of Sophia the humanoid robot. That is Mr. David Hanson, the CEO of Hanson Robotics. And down the line, we have Ms. Barbara Cooks. She is the board member of multiple global companies and formerly board member of Siemens. We also have Ms. Juliet Onama, CEO of Jumia Nigeria, and Mr. Tadahiro Kawada, CEO of Kawada Group. And at the end, we have Alexandra Santu, co-founder of the Impact Hub here in Geneva. Thank you for joining me. So, I'm going to start with a broad question about business innovation and how businesses can integrate the SDGs into their framework. So I'd like to start with you, Barbara, since you were a deep part of formulating the SDGs and you worked with the Sustainability Index. Is there a tangible business case for the SDGs in businesses? And if so, how can we make sure that more businesses start to adopt this?
Take the mic. Yes, obviously there is a business case, but let's first look at facts. I always like to start with facts. We heard some weeks ago that in order to keep our planet green, we need to go to net zero emission. It means we have to take out 42 billion tons of carbon dioxide until 2050. This is a huge task. And obviously your hopes on industries are big, mine as well, but certainly this cannot be done by one constituency alone. We just heard it before. It needs a new global concert, a cooperation between governments, NGOs, entrepreneurs and industry. I think that without that, this task cannot simply not be done. But I've also come to Geneva today with sun, but also with good news. Because as a matter of fact, already today, 2/3 of the actual CO2 problem of our world can be solved, could be solved, with existing technologies. So it's in a way quite easy. You know, you can just use it. There's also a lot of financial resources there. And companies have clearly recognized the risks of not doing it, but also the opportunities. It's a big green tech market. It will double to some 5 trillion euros by 25. So it's also very big market opportunities. Now, how can companies get in there? And what's the business case? And obviously, especially large companies do many things already. Most of them have, you know, a lot of activities across the board. They do sustainability reporting and so on. My experience with both companies, Philips first and then Siemens, and I was able to do that physically in those companies as an executive, was to really position this as a business opportunity. And in Philips, we were able to position it with green lighting, so technology, in Siemens with the green technologies, because that certainly helps, because it's part of the core business. It will motivate the teams, and you can just go for it. Behind that, obviously, you need to do a lot of things in-house, but you also need to do a lot of stakeholders in engagement. So, my experience, also now working in boards of very large global players and teaching on sustainability, yes, it can be done. There is a big opportunity for companies. It has to be done with very clear leadership, with a clear strategy and prioritization, and obviously then with a very good turnaround. And last but not least, it is a business case, yes, because in Siemens, for instance, we were able to increase in 4 years the revenues from this business from 19 to 33 billion euro. So it's very big business, but it's also a very good business case for talent recruitment, if one can name that as a business case. Millennials today, I'm teaching some of them, what they want is to work for companies that have a clear corporate purpose and that are absolutely devoted to sustainability. So yes, the business case can be made, and in order to tackle this very big CO2 problem, all companies have to really work on it, obviously combined with governments and NGOs.
Absolutely. Thank you, Barbara. So on the tip of business case, I'd like to address the next question over to you, Juliette, because you are really a pioneer in the digital landscape of Africa. The digital landscape has been large there for a while, but you were the first unicorn startup of Africa with your e-commerce platform with 1.2 billion customers and an active supporter of small businesses with over 15,000 suppliers. So we've seen that proof that Africa, the digital economy is already massive in Africa, despite the access to financial opportunities and infrastructure that some other countries and continents have. How were you able to work through some of those obstacles and become the unicorn that you are?
Thank you very much. Hello? Yeah. There are a couple of things which we did in Jumia that I think were pivotal for us in terms of accelerating our growth across Africa. The first one is, first of all, recognizing that there was a fundamental gap in terms of trust as far as e-commerce and engagement on digital platforms, were in Africa. So we built an operating model that sort of help to deal with the question of trust. So for example, you know, in Sweden, I'm sure, if you wanted to order something online, or in Switzerland, if you wanted to order something online, you would have to pay first. So we had to develop a model for post-pay. So payment on delivery was one way in which we could deal with the trust factor, recognizing the peculiarity of Africa. Another thing we did from an operating model perspective was also understanding that there's a significant number of people in Africa who don't have access to the internet. And therefore, we had to create an offline team that we call J-Force, short for Jumia Force. So these are commission agents. We have in a place like Nigeria, for example, probably have about 20,000 of these people. They have access to the internet. They can place orders on behalf of customers who are in rural areas who don't have access to the internet but do have a desire to order online. That way, we also created jobs for the youth, because most of our J-Force agents are youth, and also women who have access to internet but probably don't have a formal form of employment. The third thing I think is critical in Africa when you're looking at it from the perspective of the continent is we also realize that scalability in Africa, one way to do it, and probably the best way to do it, is through aggregation. So therefore, what we then did was to look at how we aggregate services around parts of our ecosystem. So you take logistics, for example. We don't have one big, massive UPS, DHL, FedEx, or the like that you have in all the developed markets that can cover the entire country or cover the entire continent. So we had to aggregate multiple small players into a marketplace of logistics players. And in so doing, also, we're creating jobs, because out of our total workforce, probably about 3,500 people in total. But through that aggregation in logistics and also in content development, that's another area we built marketplaces, we're able to then create indirect jobs of about 100,000 people. I think the last one I would touch on is understanding also the power of access to mobile phones. When we started 2012, the average price for a smartphone was $200, or just over $200. But with systematic partnership with smartphone manufacturers, mostly in Asia, we've been able to bring that price point down in 2018 to about below $100, so roughly about $80. We realize that the more we push it down, the more people have access to internet, and therefore more people can access, you know, digital services like e-commerce and so on and so forth. There are many other things, I guess, but these ones I will touch on as quite critical in terms of penetration into Africa.
Great, thank you so much. Now, you bring up trust as an important factor, and as more forefront technologies become a part of our everyday lives, trust is a growing concern. But particularly in cases of automation and artificial intelligence, where we're using these technologies to multiply jobs, to create new opportunities, to help people in the developing world, is trust a factor there? David, I'm going to ask you this question, since you are a master of artificial intelligence and robotics. Now, when you created Sophia, what was your original goal, and how much does trust come into play as you're developing more of her features and her intelligence?
Thank you so much. Excellent question. So in this day of where artificial intelligence is often out of sight and therefore somewhat out of mind, I was very interested in creating a kind of artificial intelligence embodiment that would bring the issues into the forefront of popular